Catherine Lacey.
Hi, Max.
It's nice to see you, my friend.
It's nice to see you too. This was the one benefit of the non-tour tour is that I could just talk to people all over the world instead of just in whatever city. So
Have you been? Has it made you sociable, the lockdown?
you mean, has it made me want to talk to people on the
Yeah.
phone?
Do you phone people and talk to
I
them?
used to. I feel like the first week it was novel, and now I'm back to my own, just uh probably being more reclusive than I should be. I feel like in the very beginning of the lockdown, it was having a positive effect, and now I think it's worse.
Do you feel like when you phone people, you have no choice but to kind of trundle through cliches of lockdown chat? There's a kind of
Which is why you have to talk to somebody for 2 hours before you to actually have a real conversation. But yeah, at one point I just was banning any talk of that, and then I don't know.
I'm peculiarly anxious and antisocial at the moment, but I wonder whether I always was. Anyway, listen, I have a cool thing for you, right?
Okay.
Because you know how fond I am of you and your work. I have with me this evening a pew.
Oh, at the end of a pew.
Yeah, it's a pew end.
Oh, that's nice.
Thanks, yeah. I've never needed it before in an event.
We found these old, we have an actual church pew that we bought a year ago. Jesse and I found in some junk shop, but I've yet to actually involve the pew in my
pew
internet interactions.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to be the first to do that. This is a beautiful thing. It was a little wood. It was the local wood the local furniture factory in my village, and the brothers used to make the church furniture, and they just went off to World War I and never came back. So they left all these half carved bits of church furniture, and sometimes with the chisel still in it. So this is an unfinished pew from 1913.
Wow.
Kind of extraordinarily moving thing.
That is.
But anyway, I'm just going to leave it here as stage.
Okay, good. Good. It's a talisman.
Yeah. Now look, this book is published in the UK a month or two ago, and it's published in America today. And congratulations. Waiting for a book to come out is a strange, discombobulating, philosophically muddied area of experience anyway. Yeah. But at this moment, it must be even more so, because so many of the things you're writing about in this beautiful, extraordinary book are being played out for us. And I would like to ask you about these things, but I think it's also lovely to hear you read. So I wondered if you would start this evening with a reading.
Sure. I'm going to read from a weird middle part. The format of the book is that there's this person that comes to town, and no one is in agreement about this person's gender or appearance or race or anything. And everyone sort of sees something different in them. Even that changes from moment to moment. And so this person is being shuffled around and is not speaking. And so they're at this house of this kind of weird outsider-y couple named Hal and Tammy, and he's going to listen to, or Hal is going to speak. Have you ever seen a peacock? Hal asked. Oh, here we go. Tammy lit a cigarette and paced the edge of the porch. Pretty things, Hal said. Tammy always liked them, so I saved up to have some out here. They came mail order, came in a crate shipped overnight. They were just so beautiful. I couldn't hardly believe it. Bright blue, sort of purple at some angles, real pretty like that. But anyway, what we did was put them out in the old chicken coop, which had just been sitting empty since we built the new one. But by the next morning, something had gotten in there and ate up two of them, blood and all those blue feathers all over the lawn. And Tammy, sweet one that she is, she went around collecting the feathers, just crying and picking up feathers. I'm using them to make something, Tammy said, in their memory. I don't know what yet, but they were just too beautiful to waste, rotting in the ground like that. Anyway, we moved what was left of the peacock, so the to the new chicken coop. And while we tried to fix up the old one, Hal said, I guess maybe a wild dog or something had ripped into it. I figured that the peacocks would be just fine in the coop with the hens for a while. I hate this part, Tammy said to herself, pacing the longest edge of the porch. We should have known better. They're all birds, Hal said, so I didn't think there'd be a problem. And it did seem right at first because all the hens piled up on one side of the coop, piled on each other like a bunch of dogs or something, afraid of them peacocks, really. But before I knew it, the biggest hen in there found the littlest peacock and pecked the damn thing near to death. I don't know what came over that bird. I still don't know. Though it just about made me believe in some kind of evil spirit or something. I mean, I just never seen a hen so riled up, making these weird gurgling noises, running real fast. So fast I couldn't catch the damn thing to slit its throat. Had to use the rifle. Imagine that, shooting a hen. Bullet tore that little thing right up, pretty much ruined it. Well, I wasn't going to cook it anyway, Tammy said. Even if you'd slit its throat like regular, I wasn't going to eat that bird. It sure did seem to be some kind of evil. That's all I was saying. I wasn't, well, I don't know. I don't know what it was or what it wasn't. Not really, not for certain. I made him bury it over there on the other side of the yard, Tammy said. I didn't want that thing near me. She smoked and stared out at the yard. Where do people go when that kind of look comes over them? So after I buried the hen, I put the last 3 peacocks in a caged-in, fenced-off part of the garden that nobody else could get to. None of our animals, nobody's dog, no wild animals, nothing. And wouldn't you just know, out of nowhere, this storm swept in, lightning and everything, some hail even, and 2 of them got drowned, and the last one was shaking there under the other 2 dead ones. And that last one, well, he held on for a week or 2 till somebody stole him, or he just up and left. I bet he ran off. It was nothing but hell here for those birds, Tammy said. I feel bad about it all the time, every day. You didn't mean no harm. I wanted peacocks all my life, ever since I was little. Her eyes were glassing over. She lit another cigarette as she spoke. Then as soon as I finally get them, I go and mess it all up. It just wasn't meant to be. You didn't do them no harm, Tams. But I did. You didn't. Indirectly, I did. Well, I don't know about. It's just as bad indirectly, just as bad, maybe even worse. I should have known more about how you keep them. I just didn't. She raised a limp hand to her face and she shook beneath it. Oh, Tammy, you couldn't have known. I didn't bring it up to make you upset, Tams. It's been years and I was just thinking of them. There's all sorts of things a person can't know till it's too late. I'll just stop there. Yeah, so most of the book is told other people are speaking in, and PEW is listening to people of this town sort of put these stories up and talk to each other in front of them. So,
would you describe PEW as a mirror? Does he reflect people's opinions and politics?
It's so hard not to use a pronoun. You know,
I just choose he because there's a clumsiness with the ambiguity that doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the book.
Of course there is. There's a clumsiness to the ambiguity because, like, baked into our language is genders already in the language, right? And of course, like, we've seen this challenged by people that are genderqueer, want to be referred to with they pronouns, and that's one thing. But when we attach that that refusal or that sort of disagreement with the gendered basis of language, when it's always attached to the same group of people, it becomes easy to for other people to dismiss or belittle it or kind of talk around it or say, well, it's just a grammatical thing, you know, when I think it's so much more than that. You know, like
well, you want slippage as well. You want movement, and
of course.
In the sense of PEW, which is not something something you have to do in the writing. That's what I mean about him being a mirror. So is he like I always describe some characters in books as being like centrifugal absences. You know what I mean? They attract energy, but it's their absence that means that they can appear in the conception of others.
Right.
Except that he's very bodied, like she is very present. Right. How do you go about creating a character like that?
I
Did you
think,
begin with Pew, or did you begin with other people's question of whether Pew is
well, I began with
unbiased?
wanting to, having this feeling of like, you know, I'm from Mississippi, and but I left it in like, I guess 2007. Was it really that recent? Anyway, it doesn't matter. I left it somewhat a while ago, and but I always sort of felt estranged from the kind of politics and the manners of the place, and what is considered sort of correct decorum. I always felt like at odds with that. But I was trying to sort of grow up and, you know, just fit in or whatever. And but I don't know, I had this feeling of like, what would it mean to actually like return to Mississippi and not be myself, you know? Like I was trying to like detach my baggage about the place from the place. And sort of, I think that's sort of where it began, you know? But because I had been trying to write about Mississippi forever. I've been trying to write about Mississippi since I was born, probably. Like all the little weird crayon short stories that I wrote, they're just like, when I see them now, they're just completely like teeming with this like anger about like everything around me. Yeah, so but then even when I was in grad school, I was trying to write essays about it, which was completely wrongheaded because I'm still too young to actually like grapple with like the place that I was born. But yeah, so I kind of had been easing toward it thematically for a long time. And yeah, I wanted to inhabit the space, but I didn't want to have to be myself in it. But then who do you be, you know?
Yeah.
It was much more freeing to be a kind of amorphous shape that was human, you know, like I didn't want to be an alien or something.
No.
But to think about the way that place, which is really just kind of America magnified, it's really a kind of distilled sort of reduction of America, the South is. Yeah, I just wanted to be a human in that place without being myself.
But you're also all the humans there. You're also every member of the congregation, as it were. But when I was reading Pew, I was like, it's not a long book, but I felt like it's one of those books that I would have been happy to read it if it was 3,000 pages long.
Really? Oh God.
Yeah, in a way, because like if you decided to make it a book of life, not necessarily a book about the South, or not necessarily even a book about America or this moment, or even the idea of otherness or the alien presence in the community, or ourselves. If you just managed to make it a book of human, like limitless, infinite, uncategorizable human experience, I would have kept on reading because like,
that's like the sweetest thing anybody's ever said. Because I feel like the way that I defend the book now, it's like it's only 200 pages or something. Like,
oh mate, welcome to my world. Welcome to my world. This is a long.
No, this is what I admire so much about Lanny and about Grief is a Thing with Feathers, is that you can get into it completely in a day, in a moment, and you can return to it completely and still find more and more there. Like that's the sad thing about like really long books. It's rare that I will reread them. At least maybe I'll reread it once, like in my lifetime. But like the really, really thick books, you just sort of, you digest it once and sort of excuse all the kind of the parts of it that maybe don't linger. You know, there's only certain parts of a book that even linger in your brain anyway.
But do you do kind of revisitation? I do a revisitation of the books and long books that have had the impact that maybe a short story or a poem might have on me. Like I'd go back into a line, which is I'm an annotator. You know, I write and fold and mark my books partly because I want to signpost the things that generated emotional friction or energy for me when I read them, and compare and contrast to who I am now and who I was then.
But then do you ever find a book, because this has happened to me and this is why I stopped writing in books, I've like come across a book that I had in high school and had to digest my marginalia, and I just wanted to die. I just could not. I really I don't want to have to think about who I was at 16 or 17. I'm just not ready for that. Maybe when I'm like quite a bit older, I will be ready to deal with her, but I can't.
My wife and I burned our letters.
You burned your letters?
Yeah, like we
why?
do it. Well, because they just sucked. They were like, the worst thing
Wait, did
ever.
you write them because you thought they were going to be good? Like, the letters are not written to be good.
Yeah, but the letters were they're between us, and we decided that they sucked and that they embarrassed us, and that we
What
got
was the
the
era?
letters served their
Because now you
purpose.
live in the same house. So you're not writing each other letters.
No,
Or do you write each other
our
letters
wooing,
still?
from
Huh?
our romantic
You're
wooing.
wooing, right?
You know, everyone's got their juvenilia. We had a silver plastic bag full of horribly like just fucking hideously over egged woo material.
Oh
Um,
man. Well,
so yeah,
I'm
we just decided like we're where we want to be. The letters serve their purpose. Let's get rid of them because they make us physically squirm. Anyway, enough about my
yeah. Well,
juvenilia. I
no.
want to talk about you. I want to talk about writing, right? Because you are a very writerly writer. And you know, we've spoken, you know, about writing a lot in the times we've spent together and everything. Like, you think very carefully about what a collection is, what a short story is, why a novel, what you know. These are vehicles for your ideas, right? You think quite carefully about it.
I'm glad that you think that.
Okay, you appear to. Why does
Okay.
it seem more accidental to you?
What?
Does it seem more accidental or haphazard to you, the form of
Yeah.
thing?
Well, I think there's this theory in stories that they're like, or that's kind of a narrative idea, and I can't remember who wrote about it. I want to say it was Charles Baxter, but I'm not sure. In an essay about one-way gates, where like there'll be a moment in a narrative where a character crosses over some sort of threshold, something they can't take back, and these moments are really, you know, it's a way of like looking at narrative and sort of thinking about how things are put together. But I feel like that kind of thing happens in the writing process where I write a lot, and I write in paper, and I write it in a bazillion documents on the laptop, and I write in my head and on whatever. And most of it is just garbage. I mean, I fiction, like I'm writing, it's like a chunk of a short story that's lingering here, or half an idea or something. And it's just this kind of sludge of crap that's around me at all times. And then some things kind of come back, or it'll be like even a year later or something. I'll remember like, oh, I had that weird thing about like a kind of recovered memory of that time I was in a field and with some friends, and some cows started charging over the hill at us and we didn't know where to go. And like, I think that belongs in this story, even though like it happened 20 years ago and I wrote it 2 years ago or something. So anyway, so I'm like trying to piece things together.
But do your sentences come out as well as they read? Like, do you revise a lot? Because the point I was trying to make, but you slightly ruined it for me, is that
sometimes and sometimes not. No, I think the sentences end up being kind of, most of them end up being architectured together in a certain way. Okay. But
and that's what you're looking for when you sit down to work, right? Is that
most of the time,
the walling and building of an architectural space?
Yeah.
Because like, across your work, you're very attentive to syntax. Like, your sentences are very beautiful. They are vessels for carrying your intellectual projects across the book.
But that to me is kind of, it's happening throughout, but then it's really like a last layer thing too, you know. But like, I don't necessarily, like when I started writing Pew, I didn't know if it was going to be I didn't know what it was going to be at all.
Okay.
You know, but because I think and that's how that's been with all the other novels too. Like, I just was writing something and I thought, well, it might be a story, it might be a novel, like we'll have to see. But if I thought that I was writing a novel when I sat down to write, I just wouldn't write. I'd just go back to sleep. It's awful. It's awful.
Yeah, it's horrifying. But so
then you go through this one-way gate, and then you are writing a novel or whatever it is, and then you have to, you know, then you have to pay the bills on that, you know.
Yeah. I just want to ask more, just a tiny bit more about your method. Do you keep notebooks where there's all this type of junk lying around?
Yeah.
That you can go back and raid in
yeah, but I've been thinking they've started to. I got rid of a bunch of mine, and now I've been thinking about getting rid of more of them. But it's sort of, you know, they're different eras. I feel like, I don't know. I got rid of a bunch of notebooks. I don't know. At various points, I've gotten rid of notebooks, but now I don't know. Like, I have this stack of the last few years, and I can't decide whether. I mean, they're full of bad stuff. Like, I know that.
Keep them.
I just have this like, vision, you know,
as quite a surgical stylist, like cutting and grafting things in quite a precise manner, because there's a precision to your thinking that's evident in your prose. It's unusual.
Well,
But I
the
guess
other day,
all writers' finished product conceals a messy process, I guess.
yeah, yeah, of course, of course. Do you keep your notebooks?
Mm.
Yeah,
And they're embarrassing, but they're just raw material.
right.
Sometimes it's the mistakes that are useful, not the. But
That's
also, I want to be asking myself decent questions further down the line. I think that comes from visual art. I think the idea of never ripping a page out of your sketchbook, because even though today's drawing has been bad, Monday's bad is Tuesday's genius, and so. Anyway,
Monday's
I want to
bad
just,
is
because I
genius.
just realised this event is so short, and I just want to spend some time in Pew's world, and I want to get to the nitty gritty of it if I can, because it's such an important book for this moment. I want to talk to you about forgiveness. No, I don't want to talk to you. I want to hear you on forgiveness, and the kind of idea of forgiveness as as the most radical proposition that ever came out of religious thinking,
Right.
and possibly where you're at with the Bible as literature, and also the great American project of possibly forgiving society. And I just wanted to read you something as a blast off point. This is
Please
from a
do.
book I love very much called On Forgiveness
Oh,
by
wow.
Richard Holloway, who is a ex-British Scottish bishop. He's talking about benign indifference. I'll send you a copy of this book, Catherine. You'll love it.
Oh,
It's about like fatalism, and the idea that is too passive an idea, really, for what he's kind of after with forgiveness. He says, the mood I am after is more celebratory than resigned. It actively says yes to the tragic reality of life, including the facts of pain and loss. Two instinctive responses lie behind this affirmation: that there is, first of all, a wise, sometimes rueful awareness that the universe is bigger than us and will get us all in the end. And secondly, that to completely understand any human act, including what we would describe as a wicked act, we would have to know all the facts of the universe. And to know all would be to forgive all.
Mm.
And I finished Pew. Obviously, we don't want to do any spoilers, but I finished Pew with like this idea of him, her, it, as a radical philosophical potentiality, like bigger thought than most of us are capable of, because of what society and indeed capitalism and indeed white supremacy or whatever has done to us as thinking beings. Right. So I wanted, if you don't mind, just like opening the floodgates of where you see Pew, where you see her, or where you see the sort of the philosophical heart of the book.
Right. This quote you just read is phenomenal and wonderful. That to actually forgive with all information would be to know everything in the universe, and then to know everything in the universe would be just to be obliterated and to know nothing and to have no history, which is sort of where Pew is. I think like that's a kind of like a valid read of what the kind of absence of that character is doing. I realized in an interview recently that I had not read the Bible since I was a child, and I read it so with such anxiety and such kind of bewildering precision, and looking for like the right way to live when I was like far too young to really understand the nuance and the paradoxes and the like inconsistencies that are in the Bible also. Like I wasn't actually prepared to deal with that. And so what happened was like I became kosher, even though like my family was Christian, but I was like, I read the Old Testament. I read the part where it described like what you're supposed to eat and not eat. I didn't call it kosher because it doesn't say kosher in the Bible. I don't think that it does. I don't remember it saying that, but anyway, I absorbed, I mean, I was like, I really wanted to know how to live, and the Bible was, everybody who said the Bible was the thing. And so I was just scrutinizing it. And then when I I reached like teenage years, I was,
you realized the
livid.
Simpsons was the thing, not the Bible.
I realized like, oh, every religion has these texts and everybody has these different ways of doing things. And like, and so then I felt livid and threw the whole thing out, and I hadn't really read it since I was like 14. And so I started like, I tried to read it and then I couldn't read it. And so I started listening to it. And even that is sort of like, it makes me so angry. I feel like that, you know what, listening to the Bible now is making me feel like it's like I'm listening to my childhood journals or something, where I'm seeing like, oh, like I remember latching onto that concept and that being really useful to like getting through life. And then this other one that just complicated things and made it really unclear. Like, I wish I could like pull out some examples right now. I've just been listening to Matthew, but I'm not going to pull out examples because I don't want to offend my mom, who's probably watching. But
but does it have any impact on you? I mean, obviously, philosophically, you wrestle with these things, as does America. But
yeah.
was it in your head as a style reference at all? Were you kind of wanting to?
No,
No.
I can't say that it was. I mean, I think in some ways, like it's baked into me in a way that it's always going to be somewhere in there. But I think I can't say that it wasn't on any intellectual kind of present level, like certainly not a part of the way that the book was put together. Yeah.
And
But
you never thought of Pew as a kind of anti, because I read someone somewhere says it's like an anti-parable. And it's an interesting thing because it has the function, or at least it could be a kind of like a knowing pastiche of the function of parable in terms of our contemporary like social realist narrative and everything. Like
yeah.
it employs certain techniques. But I wondered how it was a kind of also it was anti-religious or anti-religiosity or anti-hypocrisy, which kind of equates to the same thing in my view. Like, but did you presumably those thoughts aren't with you when you're writing the book, because you are
No.
Pew, like you are a community, you are polyphony, you are multi-voice, right?
Yeah. It's certainly those thoughts can't, I mean, I'm sure it's the same with you. Like you're not actively thinking about your sort of buried subject as you're writing the book. The book is like a narrative that somehow contains something philosophical that interests you, and you're following the narrative in order to follow the abstract idea, because it's easier to follow the narrative than it is to follow the abstract idea, because we're fiction writers and not philosophers, and kind of we're just glitched in that way. But I do think that the one thing that stayed with me from the religious childhood was a quick ability to forgive even people that I shouldn't forgive. Like I'm just, and I forget completely. I actually like completely forget things that happen. The other day we were walking around, Jesse said like, oh, you remember at that restaurant there was that waiter that like spilled a whole like soup on you, like you were mad. I can't remember this memory. It happened like 8 months ago apparently, and I don't remember it. And I think but this happens like on an interpersonal level too, where I'm like, just forget things, you said some mean thing, it's not useful to hold on to. I decided at some young age, or I think like I was trying to be like Jesus or something, and so I have this like glitch. But
Do you think that as a person, as a novelist, you're therefore possibly I don't want to speak of writing novels as some kind of sociopathic
it is
like
sociopathic.
modus operandi. Like it is, we all know
It
it is. It's
definitely
like
is.
a trade secret. But like, do you think that you're therefore you're sort of dealing with memory and social interaction in a different way to most people, because you're sort of sifting through it already, thinking what is or isn't interesting? Like, and do you have that relationship with your past or with your past characters? Like I was thinking about the character in Nobody's Ever Missing in relation to Pew, and then I was thinking about like these variations of the self, or the idea of self, with the kind of you're working through in all your work. Like that must affect the way you live, right? The way you deal with a waiter in a restaurant, or the way you deal with your partner reminding you of that thing. In a way, the novelist interrupts the Catherine Lacey to say interesting, useful, or like or oh right, revelatory, not like, and therefore like curiously disposable to me as a novelist, because I'm looking for the thing that generates a bit more tension than that
Right.
idea. Like, because also you cherish
I think it
ambiguity.
used to be worse. I think that like mode of kind of paying attention to your life as if it's going to give you something to write about, or as if it's going to like teach you something that needs to be in your writing. I think that I definitely I definitely feel like I was more that way when I was younger, when I had some kind of insecurity about my own ability to generate material. And I feel like as things have gone on and I just realized like, oh, you generate things. Like you don't have to write down every single fucking idea you have. You don't need to keep a notebook by your bed and like wake up and write it down. Otherwise you're going to forget it. It's like, if it's good, it'll come back.
It's there,
you know,
yeah.
if it's like, I don't feel like quite the same way about, the interaction I have with my life in that way. But this idea of like the self sort of being a lie, that is very much a part of my life. But I think that was like the kind of the original, like what ultimately got me out of Christianity was studying Eastern religions, because, you know, I had studied Christianity on my own. I mean, in church, in like many hours of like after school programs and like summer programs and summer camp, like I had just been bathed in Christianity like my whole life until like my teenage years. And then,
Rubbed it
but
in
then I
all
really
your
yes, the oil of Jesus just all over the place.
Sometimes I would drink Christianity even in the morning. Like one of your characters says, I had a beer on the way to church this morning.
Yeah. Yeah, I was completely addicted to it. And so then I really immersed myself in Eastern religion. I wanted to get as far away from it while still being close to it. And it was like through Eastern thought that I stopped being Christian. And you know, to study Eastern religions when you're an unstable teenage ex-Christian or semi-ex-Christian is really to like do a number on yourself. And I really started to feel like I was not a person and that no one was a person. And then I proceeded from there, you know. This is not specific to me. I think this happens to a lot of people that are raised in one religion or another and then kind of have the moment of like, you know, leaving the bubble of the Truman Show or whatever, where you're like, oh, like it was an idea I was living in, you know. And then like, what other things have I spent years believing that I've been wrong about? And I think, you know, that's just where that's what I'm doing now.
Well, that's why I like Pew, because it's like an invitation to walk and think in this space. I cherish ambiguity in fiction. I think it's one of its most lethal potential. You know, I think it's one of them. It's one of the sharpest weapons in its like arsenal.
Mm-hmm.
And I like interpretive doors being open, and I like the idea that you might, as a reader of Pew, I mean, I it's like a mirror. Like I said, like I was reading it and I was thinking about animism and the things that I believe in relation to, you know, human beings and the planet and personhood in human and the non-human in the natural world or whatever. I can see
that's something I really love about Lonnie also. And I read Lonnie after I was done with this and felt like a lot of kinship. And another thing has happened where I've noticed several other writers that I admire who also happen to be friends of mine, I feel like are writing sort of similar books all at the same time. There's a book that's coming out in a few, maybe a month or so, by my friend Maurice Mayer. Although she wrote this book before we became friends, only recently, called The Seventh Mansion, that is about, it's also about a character that's, wow, how do you boil it down to a thing? But a character that's sort of like trying to take care of the entire world and trying to empty themselves of personhood as a way to do that. And yeah.
Well, I think that there is an extremity of experience at the moment. Fostered partly by the times, but also by the world. You know, the world we're living, the way we exist on social media and stuff is very dangerous. Right, we've got to do our questions. I'm ready. Okay, I'm going to do a Q&A. Right. Yes, Bugs, the greatest bookseller in America. Catherine, you've elsewhere stated that you don't want to write or be expected to write the same book over and over.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you have thoughts on the advantages of reinventing, if it is in fact reinvention, yourself with each book, or if you feel there are expectations you're bucking with each new novel.
It just seems to me that, you know, over time you are a different person. And of course, like you end up writing about the kind of slipperiness of self. Everybody does. And I think like now that I've seen sort of that that I've kind of repeated themes without even realizing it, that I'm revisiting themes. I don't want to have to then be bound to like revisiting those same themes with the same form over and over again. And I mean, on some level, it's unconscious, like the form that you end up choosing. But then on some level, like, you know, there are certain moments of when you're writing where you decide to, you know, go left or go right. And I don't want to keep going right because I was rewarded for going right last time. I'd rather figure out how to go left or turn back or, you know, do a somersault or something. Like it's interesting. I like writing, but I don't want to just I don't want to get bored by myself, you know. And I was just teaching last week and through the 10 House Writers Workshop, and all my students were amazing. It was wonderful. And I'd never been teaching while I was actually going through like book publication, like headfuck. And I had this idea in class where I really want the students, I don't allow them to praise each other's work in the classroom, and I don't allow them to like, you know, like heavily criticize it either. They're only allowed to ask questions, and I don't want either thing to become what guides us or what guides me, I guess, as a writer. Like I don't want to be beholden to the positive things that someone has said, and I don't want to be beholden to the negative things either.
Yeah.
And so,
well, you are beholden to the chat function in Zoom, so if we could just rattle these answers off a bit quicker, please, Catherine Lacey.
Okay.
Nathan says, Catherine, voice is always a driving factor of your work, but PEW seems less like an internal exploration of your characters than an indictment of certain collective mentalities. What changed for your approach to character? Did writing PEW feel like exploring something familiar or something far away?
Yeah, something far away for sure. Well, you know, like how do I even, I don't even know how to get up next to what I want to try and say, but I think like from a young age, I felt really mad about the way I was being treated because I was a girl, like the things that I was allowed to do and not allowed to do. And then like, you know, that this is, you know, this happens to like every woman I know, basically, where your anger at the whole system as it's represented by men just becomes louder and louder and louder and louder and louder. And then you have to carry that around with you to navigate the world. Like your anger at men generally. And I think, you know, like obviously I know a lot of nice men, but I wanted to not have to deal with that noise in my brain. Like, and you know, I think that it's an effort actually to use that as a tool that's positive rather than encumbering. And yeah, I think most women have to deal with that on some level at some point. Yeah, and I think PEW is just sort of as a mode, a way to just rid myself of that burden.
I love this answer, but we're moving on, I'm afraid. Claire Malcolm, who is a lovely person, says, I've loved all your novels, Catherine. I see connections across them. Would you say there is an overall concern that drives the work? Thank you for PEW. I read it some weeks ago and I'm still thinking about it.
Oh, thank you, Malcolm. Yeah, I think that there is, but it's like, you don't, like the stuff we were saying earlier about, I feel like I had never actually said it out loud until I'm talking to you, Max, which is like, this is actually why I do my workshop the way that I do it, because I think the pressure of having to speak in front of people and answer questions that you don't know what they're going to be sort of gets you to say things and make connections that you wouldn't normally make.
Was it against the clock?
A little bit, because they only have an hour, you know, so it's like, let's get to it. I don't remember what the question was. Oh, is there
connection across all your work, the overall concern?
Yeah, and I think it is this thing that I realized by Max's question and his quote that he presented and everything, where I think it is this rupture between well, I mean, for me personally, between Christianity and not Christianity, but I think it's just this kind of crisis of the self. It's certainly, I think this concern is even louder in what I'm working on right now, or it's loud in a different way than it is in this book. So Yeah,
We have some really incredibly beautiful questions here about Mississippi and about character development and place and giving in to yourself and admit that what you're writing is a novel, etc., etc., and one about your tattoos. But we are so up against time here that I just, in the spirit of one of the questions from someone called CB is, what books have you both enjoyed lately? And I think just because we're hosted by Books on Magic tonight, and
let's talk about somebody else's books to go out on.
We've got to support the bookshops, and we want to recommend some other shit by our colleagues because we're part of a community. We don't write alone. We write as part of a living, breathing ecosystem of other writers. And we've got to support independent bookstores. Books and Magic was the last bookstore I shopped in when I was on American soil before all this shit kicked off. So, Catherine, 3 books you're reading right now, and I'll do the same.
Okay. Well, here are 2 that come out in the States in what is that, September. They're the 2, Exposition and The White Dress. They complete, they're Natalie Leger. They complete the trilogy with Sweet for Barbara Loden, which was kind of sleeper hit. Wonderful book. It defies, it's fiction, it's an essay, it's a bazillion things. It's in translation from the French. Wonderful book. Wonderful 2 books. And I could go into what they're actually about, but if you liked Sweet for Barbara Loden, and if you haven't read Sweet for Barbara Loden, you probably should, to see if it is your kind of book, because it probably is, because it's a wonderful kind of ambidextrous book. Those 2 are in the same step, but about different subjects. And then this is from New Directions. It came out like maybe a year or so ago. I can't remember. The Hospital by Ahmed Boniani. He's a Tunisian writer. He's dead, but it was translated by Lara Vernaud. My French, sorry. Wonderful, dark, strange, Kafkaesque book. That's technically 3, but the 2 that go together. I just got Brian Washington. He has a novel coming out.
I love that book. I love it.
I do too. I'm only like halfway into it, but I had been reading his essays for a while and just always enjoying them. And then I was like, oh my God, this is that story collection that I didn't get to last year. And so I've just gotten to it. And he has a novel coming out, which is always exciting. So yeah.
All right, my 3 are The Discomfort of the Evening.
Ooh.
Has this come out in the States yet? Dutch novel?
No, I don't think so. Or maybe it has. I don't know.
It's by Marika Lucas.
Coming out in the fall.
Unbelievable. You got to get your hands on a copy of that. Okay. Desert Notebooks by Ben Ehrenreich, about the end of the world, time, philosophy, the tyranny of Western civilization, white supremacy, the very idea of human beings in space and time, Maya, everything. Huge, beautiful, wild book. And then this, which The Memory Police, which just kicks ass from page 1. It's incredible.